Hey guys, welcome to another bonus video. So in this video, we're going to discuss how the recently launched GTX 1650 compares with a RX 570 that has been tuned, meaning it has been underclocked and undervolted. In the reviews that are out and about on the internet, the RX 570 is the faster graphics card. It does depend a little bit on the game. However, it also consumes quite significantly more power. But that's usually with the RX 570 being untuned, the power limit raised to the maximum and going as fast as possible. So I sat down and I did a bit of tuning, and let's have a look at the results. So we're going to look at two games, one that runs really well on the AMD cards and another one where the difference between NVIDIA and AMD is much less. So the first game is Strange Brigade using the Vulkan API. So I've got an RX 570 from ASUS with 4 GB of video memory, and in this game the reading at the wall, so I've got a power meter, we're seeing 208 watts. So that's the entire computer, and I will put the system specifications down below in the description. Now, next I went into Wattman and I tuned the video card for maximum power efficiency. So I lowered the clock speed to 1000 megahertz and the voltage all the way down to 750 millivolts. So that is a lot less than the default settings. So the power went from 208 down to 147 watts for the entire system. So that's a power drop of 30% for the entire system. In terms of performance, looking at the FPS, we're going from 91 FPS down to 77. So that's a loss of only 15% performance. And in this game, I had a look at some reviews. The RX 570 with a performance loss of 15% should still run faster compared to the GTX 1650. Now, in terms of power draw for GTX 1650, unfortunately, I do not own a GTX 1650, but I've got a lot of NVIDIA cards that do not have a PCI Express power connector. So I use the GTX 950, and most cards do have a PCI Express power connector, but I've got a special version from Gigabyte which does not use a power connector. So this card uses close to the 75 watts through the PCI Express bus. Now, using this card, the power draw was 129 watts. So this is still less than the tuned RX 570, but the gap is now much narrower. So the Radeon consumes 147 watts, the GeForce 129 watts. So the GeForce does consume less power, but in Strange Brigade, the slowed down Radeon should still perform faster. The second game we're looking at is Rise of the Tomb Raider. This one runs traditionally a little bit better on the NVIDIA cards, and the performance difference with the Radeon is not that great. So I try to pick two games where we can see one situation running a game that's running well on AMD, and another situation where the game runs a bit stronger on the NVIDIA card. So in this game, once again, power limit all the way plus 50. We're seeing a power consumption of 230 watts. So that's a little bit higher than what we saw with Strange Brigade. Now going back into Wattman and lowering the clock speed to 1000 megahertz and the voltage to 750 millivolts, the power reading is now 163 watts. So that's a huge drop. That's almost minus 60 watts. And in percentage, we are reducing the power consumption once again by 30%. Looking at the FPS, with the video card running at full blast, we're getting 82 FPS. That drops down to 70 FPS. So from 82 to 70, that's a drop of 13% in terms of performance. So in this game, which is traditionally running better on the GeForce, losing 13% of performance, we will likely end up slightly behind the GeForce 1650. And in terms of power consumption, the GeForce once again measures 129 watts at the wall, compared that to 163 watts. So that's a delta of roughly 30 watts. So in this game that is more optimized and runs better on the GeForce, after tuning our Radeon, we will end up with slightly less performance than the 1650 and consuming around 30 more watts compared to the GeForce. So to summarize everything, firstly, it does depend on the game. If the game is well optimized for the Radeon cards and you see a delta of like 20-25% in reviews, then the tweaking of the clock speed and the voltage really pays off. You will still end up with a faster card, and in terms of power consumption, you maybe 20-25 watts more than the GeForce. So the situation is definitely greatly improved. Now, if you're dealing with a game where the difference between the RX 570 and the GeForce is not that great to begin with, let's say 5 to 15% or something like that, then you will still see a benefit with the voltage and clock speed tuning. However, you will likely end up with performance that is a little bit behind the 1650, and the power draw is still a little bit higher, maybe 30 watts. But once again, it's quite comparable. So you're getting similar performance, maybe a little bit slower, and the power consumption difference is now a lot smaller, around 30 watts. So definitely the situation has improved. And what I like to point out is that with the Radeon, you have a choice. You can choose to have a power efficient card that runs a bit slower and that is energy efficient, but you can also choose to go full blast, have high FPS at the cost of a higher power draw. And the drivers are actually really good. You can create several Wattman profiles and then link these profiles to individual games. So if you're playing an older game where you're getting over 100 FPS or whatnot, you can use a power efficient profile. And if you're running a more modern game where it struggles to stay above 60 FPS, then you, by all means, you just unleash it and clock it as high as you can at the cost of high power consumption. Whereas on the NVIDIA card, it's always going to stay a power efficient card, and you have no choice. You cannot make it go any faster, even if you're willing to sacrifice a bit of a higher power bill, so to speak. So basically we can see that with a bit of tweaking and tuning with the Radeon card, we can basically narrow the gap between these two cards by quite a large margin. And considering that the RX 570 is not only cheaper, it also performs better. You can get it used for really good prices, but even new. And it's available with either 4 or 8 gigabytes of VRAM. So that's a really strong case for the Radeon cards. Now, with the GeForce, we have to be fair. There's a difference between tuning a card and having a card that physically doesn't require a PCI Express power connector. So if you have such a machine, then by all means, the GeForce is the stronger option, because on the Radeon card, when you unplug the PCI Express power connector, the machine, it simply, I think it will turn on, but it will switch to the integrated graphics if you have one. So yeah, if you're constrained by a power supply, then you really have no option. And in that case, going with a GeForce might be the better option. But we have the usual arguments that you can get the RX 570, including a new power supply, depending on the region, for the same price as a 1650. So either way, I believe the RX 570 is definitely the better buy, and give it a bit of attention and spend a bit of time with the tweaking the voltages and the clock speed, and it will really pay off. So as always, guys, we have our regular video on Friday, but do let me know what you think of all of this, and yeah, share your thoughts. Very eager to hear from you, and otherwise I shall see you soon with another video.